So I have a confession to make. As a junior studying environment sustainability, I don't really know what sustainability is. I don't think I know what climate change is. I don't know what global warming is, or greenhouse gases, or even conservation. I mean, I know what they are, but sometimes they just blur together, and I find myself spitting them out without a specific meaning in mind, almost like they've turned into euphemisms or buzzwords. This summer, I worked with the Wildlife Conservation Society, and I came face to face with this issue. What does conservation actually look like? Not just in the classroom sense of ecologists are conserving this species to preserve this ecosystem, but a very real, very current sense. How does conservation actually happen? Where is it happening? How should it happen? And what are the actual impacts? By answering these questions over the course of the summer, I discovered what conservation really means and how to effectively communicate this meaning to an audience through the power of storytelling. So within the Wildlife Conservation Society, I worked within the Climate Adaptation Fund, also known as CAF. And at the beginning, I was kind of confused. If you'd asked me before the summer, I would have described conservation as a way to prevent change, to protect an ecosystem. So how does conservation, which prevents change, address climate? When change literally always comes after climate. But I quickly learned that the type of conservation work that CAF funds is not traditional. Fencing off land, protecting any species at any costs, in fact, it is this traditional type of conservation that CAF wants to avoid. This is because these snow globe-like ecosystems just don't exist anymore. The climate is changing, so must too our conservation strategies. So, Wildlife Conservation Society is redefining what conservation really means. They're all about managing change, funding strategies that transform ecosystems so they can better adapt to climate change. I like to compare this to funding your grandpa versus funding your college friend. Your grandpa would support a traditional change-resistant strategy. Like, I will plant these native plants at any cost, anywhere, just let me have the same old, same old. Your friend would say, support like a new way of doing things. And they would say, sure, we can plant these new, maybe non-native species that might be better equipped to handle heat and drought. So WCS would fund the grandpa, fund the college friend, not the grandpa. Anyways, the best part about these projects is that they all tell stories. Stories of people coming together to create a unique solution tailored to their ecosystem. So first, there's an important bit of context behind my work this summer. Recently, Biden passed the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, as well as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, which gives federal agencies billions of dollars to spend on environment and climate prioritized work. So basically now federal agencies like the U.S. Forest Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they have all this money they can spend on conservation work. But in order for this work to be truly effective, it needs to be climate informed. And my task was to communicate this. Through a series of case studies, I had to somehow tell federal practitioners why their work had to be climate informed and how they could go about doing so. And of course, there are a few challenges to doing this. The first one was sorting and selecting which projects to showcase. I could categorize by location, by the climate challenge each project addressed, or by the ecosystem they took place in. And there were a lot of spreadsheets like this that I picked through to try to find some exciting way of piecing together certain projects. The third The second challenge, was communicating what made this conservation project more climate informed than other conservation projects. The WCS uses a spectrum from resistant to transformative. So if we were to think of like an ecosystem as a garden, the resistant strategy would basically be putting a fence around the garden. Protect the garden at all costs, no change. Resilience would be taking down the fence, but maybe leaving the garden with a few new plants that might help it withstand pests. And then the transformation side of the spectrum would be replanting the garden with climate-adapted flowers or trees that can withstand warmer summers. And this would be the strategy that fully embraces change. So I tried to showcase projects at this end of the spectrum. So within my case studies, I needed to highlight the specific actions that made this project more transformative or made it more climate informed. The third challenge is how to present all this information in an accessible and engaging way, all while tying it back to the main theme of how this conservation project is climate informed. So this is one of the case studies I created, and they all ended up following this similar structure. So started with this quick summary, a few like pull out stats that kind of grabbed the practitioner's attention, and then this third part was kind of highlighting or like zooming in on the project at hand and pulling out some specific and innovative, I guess, facts. And then the fourth one kind of displayed the solutions that this project used to scale the impact of their work. So I'm just going to go to a little more specifics here. So the summary portion. Concise title that captured the main points of the project, in this case, resilient urban landscapes to help pollinators and birds adapt in South Texas. I also included the location and then a quick summary that summarized the most important parts of the project and also added in like a cool tidbit. In this case, it was like it offered co-benefits to the community as well as being a conservation strategy that would try to pique the federal agencies, whoever was viewing this, their interest in the project. The second was, again, these stats. So again, these were the projects that WCS had funded and that federal agencies had collaborated with. So the whole point was to show them that they had, like, the extent that just like kind of cool numbers that had resulted from the project they had funded. Again, just a quick view, kind of pulling out the most important parts of the project. And then solutions deployed to scale and replicate. I'm kind of zooming through here. So the fourth challenge was being concise yet informative. I had to go through many iterations to narrow down the words I wanted to include and the images I wanted to include. And then at the end, I ended up creating 3 sets of 3 case studies. These were for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. This one was about like removing invasive species to support seabird populations. This middle one was about installing hardwood forests and wetland creation. And then this last one talked about a community-led planning of climate-resistant flowers and grasslands. So all of these have been done. Again, these are all like little stories of real on-the-ground work. And then this set was for the Department of Agriculture. I find this one really cool because their project basically airlifted in these bags of mulch containing climate-resilient seeds. So I thought that was really cool. And then this one over there talked about beaver like reintroduction, which would help restore aquatic organism habitat. And then this is the last set. The third one is going to be about bats, but I haven't quite finished that one yet. Okay. So what I love about these is that they're all little stories. Reading about them is like holding a little chapter book in my hands, and looking at them together is kind of like an anthology of hope. I like this quote, it's true positive impact is made by getting specific. So in creating my case studies, I didn't just tell federal practitioners why climate-informed conservation is so important. Instead, I was telling a specific story. Here are communities in South Texas that came together to plant wildflowers and grasslands, choosing species that would bloom at different times to feed pollinators year-round. By just changing that species they planted, they made their strategy climate-informed while also reducing flooding and creating green space. And if there's anything this internship has taught me, it's that we make a lot of important decisions as communicators. We have to decide where to be more concise and condense a story into a word, and where we have to elaborate to use a story to revitalize a word. As environmental communicators, I believe we need to do a whole lot more of the latter. It's our duty to revitalize words like conservation, sustainability, and climate change to actually mean something to those who hear them. Because communicators, as Anna said, are really just storytellers. And as storytellers, we don't just hand a bunch of words to our listeners, but help them take our words to heart. Thank you.